So good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Mary Jane Burke, and I work at the Marin County Office of Education. We're very excited to welcome you here this morning. I want to give you just a little bit of background, just as a reminder. Any information that you hear today, this will be recorded and be available to you on the Rethinking Schools website, along with any materials. So just note that you'll be able to get more information and hear this again at any point or share it with your friends. So that's number one. Number two, by way of background, just for you to be aware that our public schools over many, many years have had the opportunity to collaborate at least 3 times a year or so with our private independent parochial school partners. And one of the things that is, I think, most important, particularly in the current COVID environment, is that we all have a good understanding of how interconnected we actually are and how important it is that we work together and learn from each other as we think about how it is that we're going to rethink schools. And so having said that, you're going to have a great opportunity to hear from some of our partners. And so I'm going to introduce them briefly. Travis Brownlee from Marin Academy, Chris Mazzola from Branson School, and Chris Valdez from Marin Catholic. And they've agreed to share with us sort of where they've been on their travels in the current environment and where they're headed. And so to each of you, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it and look forward to hearing your presentation. And so my job now is to pass this off to Travis Brownlee from Marin Academy. Thank you, Travis.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane, and thanks for this opportunity. Chris and I, Chris Valdez and Chris Mazzola and I really welcome the opportunity to share what we've learned because we actually are really interested in collaborating and understanding what we can learn, all of us, from each other. We all have a singular focus, and that is to do what's best for kids in their education and how to support our teachers and other members of staffs and administrators at schools that help make that happen. It's the most important thing we do. And I remember my cousin gave me a mug when I became a teacher some 40 years ago, and it said, "Those who can teach, those who can't go into less important lines of work." Now, there are obviously a lot of important lines of work, but I do believe that what we do is incredibly important. So Chris and I are here to share what we've learned and what we, in part, maybe haven't learned. But I want to cite one statistic that I'm going to come back to at the very end, and that is this. In March, and we are talking as we're all high school principals, and that's our area of expertise. In March, in the United States, overnight, we went from having 3.3% of high school students were homeschooled to having 100% of high school students schooled at home. That's a drastic and enormous change that no one could really anticipate. So all of us have been moving very quickly and largely with one thing in mind, which is what's best for kids in their education. So that's where we're coming from and how we set this. We are a group of educators that work in particular environments, as are you, but we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go now to the next slide. That's who we are. Feel free to contact us anytime if you have questions. I wanted to talk here at this first part, which is we have found 5 major factors for success. Now, as you know, things are changing daily and weekly around COVID-19 and starting back at school and what the protocols are going to be. For us, once we sifted through that, we found 5 major factors that we believe will help all of us be successful and will not change regardless of protocols. I'll also say, I think that these are things that can help us beyond a pandemic. Once this is done, I believe these are things that can strengthen all of our schools so that we can be better teachers of our students. The first is access, and we'll go into more detail about those things. The second is directive leadership on the part of principals and superintendents. The third is student learning and faculty teaching. There's some very important things that we have learned about working online. Task force, problem-solving models that are distributive in nature and require leadership beyond principals or superintendents or boards. And then finally, because you can't have great leadership in that way without leadership support. So I'm going to move to the next slide and talk a little bit about access, and I'm going to pass it to Chris, Chris Mazzola, who's then going to pass it to Chris Valdez, and then we'll all come back at the end. Access, we have put as number one. If we are going to be in this situation, we know that learning online or blended learning online and in person, is simply going to be a fact of this next year and may well become an aspect of teaching and learning that could help us in the future in many ways. But here are the parts that we felt were critical for students, and this does not change regardless of protocols. Every child needs robust technology in his, her, or their hands. They need the proper kind of computer, whatever it is that you're using. The second thing is that technology will be useless without access to robust Wi-Fi. That will be critical. However that can happen, however we can make that happen, wherever those resources come, that's a critical piece of this being successful for us. This next piece, the learning management system, or LMS, is something that is connected to some of our other topics, but the learning management system is important. I know at Marin Academy for a while, we were on one particular system and it was sort of an opt-in thing, and over years we got most of our teachers to be on it. We now recognize is that we need to have a singular learning management system that everybody is on. Because one of the things that undercuts success of students is the cognitive dissonance that comes when they are moving from platform to platform that is driven by the idiosyncrasies either of a course or a particular teacher. So an agreed upon, totally everybody part of learning management system is critical. And finally, whether it is in our communications, whether it is in our technology, whether it's in how we make decisions, predictability, simplicity, and certainty are critical. So for us, we need to be predictable. You know, we need to, if we say we're going to communicate in the middle of July, we need to do that. We have found it lowers people's anxiety. Simplicity, not simple-mindedness, but making things as simple as possible. A learning management that requires 6 to 8 clicks to get a kid to what they need to do isn't going to work. And certainty, to be clear about what we can be certain about and to be clear about what we can't be certain about, and to speak about timelines where we hope we can be able to create that. So technology, Wi-Fi, learning management system, and predictability, simplicity, and certainty are critical. I'm now going to turn it over to Chris to talk about directive leadership.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today, and thanks for having us. So just to dive right into this, because I know our time is short, one of the things that we found and that we do in independent and parochial schools is leadership is really distributed. And in this case, it had to sort of be pulled back into more directive leadership and more, eyes of the principal or head of school on every piece of school life that perhaps we are always so involved in. We knew, as Travis just said, simplicity was key to both shifting to online overnight, and also simplicity is key in planning for next year. We've had to totally remake our schedule. Travis has as well. Chris, I think, has done as well. And I'm sure all of you are thinking about that too. But it's all, the schedules are so much a part of the culture of the school. And we have some trade-offs to make next year in terms of how do we best support our students in coming back to school? How do we keep them safe? And how do we make, they do their best learning on campus with us. And so our goal is to get them back here, but it requires fundamentally shifting the way we do things. And that's a real challenge for teachers, for staff, for students, for parents. And, but it has to really be a directive situation because we could spend all summer hemming and hawing about what we might do, what we should do, and decisions need to be made quickly and communicated quickly. And I'm sure all of you have found that. And how do you, I think the other thing that we talked a lot about and spent a lot of time is not just transferring our instructional models to online. What you do in the classroom, it doesn't necessarily translate well to an online course. So, the professional development involved for teachers was huge. We took several days to do that and then had ongoing professional development throughout the spring. We will next year as well. Our teachers are required, and I think Travis's are doing the same program as our teachers. They're required to do a course from an online school called One Schoolhouse this summer. And, that's tricky. Teachers don't think they work in the summer sometimes. So we will also have ongoing professional development in blended learning next year, and how to teach well online, how to assess online, all of those things. So the other thing we wanted to pay a lot of attention to and be really mindful of is the SEL, the social emotional piece of it all. Students at home, sequestered with their families, especially teenagers in our case. It's a tough thing. I mean, they love to come to school as much for the social part of it and the relationship part of it than as the school part of it. So we wanted to create ways that would allow those relationships and kind of communities within communities continue. We just really kept our human development classes going, our parent education, and we also wanted to support the parents. We had parent ed throughout. We ran a series on basically positive parenting during COVID. And we had our sports teams continue to meet weekly or bi-weekly. Sometimes some met twice, some met once, because we wanted, again, that relationship to continue. We found that the kids were so bereft at losing those connections to their coaches, to their mentors, to their teachers, to each other. So we kept as much going as we could online. Now I happened to be helping coach the tennis team this spring. It's pretty difficult in terms of team dynamics to actually do anything very useful in a Zoom call on a sports team. But we tried to get creative and provide training exercises. Our strength and conditioning coach here had a daily tip of the, I guess it was an an exercise of the day, he called it. And it would be sent out to all students and parents. And it was something simple that you could do with no equipment whatsoever. And it was very popular and very positive. Everyone really looked forward to those. So we really tried to find ways to keep the community going. Whether we were successful or not, I mean, I don't think it's anywhere near as successful as the model that we're used to, but in being creative, we were able to support folks. The other thing I think that Travis touched on is just how the importance of simplicity, so that you can toggle between online and school and face-to-face several times easily, at the drop of a hat. We've really tried to create something that will sustain us through next year, but also is just can be changed on a moment's notice without upsetting the apple cart completely. That's really been our process, is to keep it simple and flexible. Challenges of too much process and too many cooks. That's always a challenge in independent schools. Well, I think probably in all schools. Everybody wants to have a say in what's happening with your schedule. It's just not possible to create a schedule with 5 or 10 or 20 or 40 or 100 people. So that we had to sort of take that and hope that the teachers would trust that we were doing what was in the best interest of the students and of their work as well. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Yep. So the student learning and faculty teaching, we don't have a lot of evidence about, was it successful? Did we create a successful model? We do know, I think, the long hours on Zoom is hard for everyone. And for next year, when we are not online, we're trying to be creative. I mean, when we are online, we're trying to be creative about, are there other ways that we can get off Zoom and take our classes outside, for example, with a phone or, whatever. We're just trying to be mindful of the fact that, for all of us too, 8 hours on Zoom a day is not good. It's just not good for anyone. It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your physical health. So we're trying to be mindful of that. And how much can students take in being talked at, and how do we create a collaborative learning environment on Zoom when it's just harder to do. Again, the minimizing transitions for everyone was really important. Our teachers they did a phenomenal job, but it was not easy. And I think it was just their love of students that actually pulled them through, because the logistics of it all, they found very difficult. And I think they are equally concerned about next year. So we just wanted to be the steady voice of reason, creating predictability, so there weren't constant surprises. We tried to sort of be ahead of the curve on that. Not totally successful, just because things kept changing. But we wanted to basically not have them feel all of the stress and pressure that we were feeling. That once we got going, everything was going to be okay, and everything's going to be okay next fall. We did not want to translate, all of the worries that we had to our parents or our students or our teachers. And I think I'm now, actually, one more thing I want to say that I didn't touch on the last slide. We found that the most successful thing we did throughout this entire episode was our communication was often and in varied ways. Sometimes it was a taped message, sometimes it was a Q&A with me, but to all aspects of the community, to our parents, to our students, and to our faculty and staff. We just were trying to push out as much as we could in order to keep the community wholesome as a whole. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Valdez, who's going to talk about the task force approach.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so just a couple of minutes here, so I'm going to kind of go brief. I'm going to echo some things that have already been said, maybe and maybe sort of talk specifically how the work played out at Marin Catholic. So, distributive leadership is for me an independent school term. We call it hierarchy in the Catholic Church, right? It's that pointy thing, the deal is hierarchies can be frustrating for certain. But you also know that sort of more flattened models or egalitarian models can be wholly inefficient, right? So we have to determine the best structure for the situation that we're in. And so we immediately went to the org chart and said, we are following the org chart, and we're following it to the letter of the law, which we don't normally do, right? We have an org chart and it sits aside and nobody even knows who does what all the time. You find the first administrator you find and you ask them to, for the help you can. We went away from that. So one of the first things that I did was, I reviewed the org chart to make sure it was clean and clear, and then I annotated it actually. So I annotated it for our faculty and staff, and then I shared it with our parents. So they knew exactly who does what, because they're not always sure, and they knew exactly who they should contact given any certain circumstance. And this was hugely helpful because it allowed me to say, I'm not the right person for that, right? And allowed the rest of my administrators to do that as well. And so there was just a much more efficiency, and it was very clear to people how they should sort of follow procedures. So that was really, really helpful. It also because I did that, it allowed me to take over a lot of the communication that needed to be done, to Chris's point. And we did the same thing. One of the things that was really important for us at Marin Catholic was that our families and our full community heard from either myself or Tim Navoni, who's our president, on a regular basis, and in our voices, right? So it wasn't just we didn't just send emails out that were our notes, our MC notes, we call them, that we on a regular basis. These were regular, daily for a while, email communications that were actually in our voice, right? So they were formal and informal, they were anecdotal, sometimes informational. The whole goal was to sort of inform and inspire. And I can't claim that actually happened, but that was the intention, right? So to keep it very familiar, making sure that the communication was actually in our voices, right? So once you hit the org chart, you kind of we had that sort of set. It allows you to sort of back away in some ways and let people do their jobs, and I think that was a cause for a lot of success, if there was success. One of the other keys in that. So I was talking about the communication at the principal's level, but maybe the greatest, most important thing we did at Marin Catholic was we had our attendance secretary. So we have an attendance assistant, and we took roll every day, and we had she followed up within a half hour after every class for all those kids that were actually not showing up on the Zoom meetings. It was unbelievable to have somebody say, my kid's not in class, but he's right in the room and he has his computer on right now. What are you talking about? He's not in class. And of course the deal was he was doing something else on the computer, but it really sort of allowed us to sort of establish that community. And Lori Collins, who's our attendance assistant, she's just got a high touch personality. She knows how to connect with people really well. So having that outreach on a daily basis meant a lot to people, and it got around to the kids. Like your accountability is still here, right? So so I think that sort of hierarchical, or the activation of the org chart, was really a huge part of what got us through the last quarter. The other thing is, it was really a sort of defining of terms. I think this is also really important, that we had to sort of reestablish a vocabulary for some things. So an example that might be, well, how we talked about assessment, for example. And what we did was we sort of produced some language that everybody could sort of easily repeat back and forth to one another. So we started talking about assessment in terms of low stakes and high touch, right? And so that's an easy thing to remember. It's got a little rhythm to it, and it's something that can cause you to sort of pause and stop and think about what assessment is, right? And it was soon that our teachers were sort of repeating that low stakes, high touch assessment now, right? The low stakes meaning we're not going to get big tests that are going to freak kids out, and we can't give tests anyway, really, that we feel secure about. And high touch meaning just invested in the kids on the most relational level that's possible. So that leadership was also about making sure that the vocabulary that we were using was aligned and standardized and universally used across the board there. We're talking about task force approach, right? So once the order is all set, then you make sure that everybody has their roles. And we had to redefine some roles because the domains have changed a little bit, right? So we had to define the domains. We're using a model called Leading with Hope. It comes out of the Greeley Center at Loyola University, and they just sort of they nail them down for Catholic schools in really 4 buckets. One's just logistics and planning. The other one is creating community and Catholic identity. The third one is curriculum instruction, and the fourth one was tech support. So we adopted that model, and again, you just sort of assign those domains to the different offices, and I think it was really a really helpful thing, again, for our leadership to recognize and understand. As we're sort of looking.
Next slide.
Yep. Thank you. So and then the other idea here is just a leadership support. I'm going to go quickly here because I know we're running out of time, but I think it was really important that we activated our networks and expanded them, right? And I want to just make 2 points on that. One is I just have to sing the praises of the Marin County Office of Education, Mary Jo Burke. I know we do this on a regular basis, right? But I really do have to say that I just feel so completely blessed. There was so much good communication. There was so much invitation. There was this dropping of the boundaries between public and private schools. Matt Willis and Lisa Santora, all having those people in the fold, returning your calls. That's just amazing. So that was really important. The other thing was activating our board, and our board is made up of people with expertise far outside of education for the most part. So we're able to take a lot of resources and transfer some of those ideas to our school itself. That really is sort of helpful, especially as it comes to planning for the onboarding of kids again and setting up structures. I'm just imagining this sort of hamster habitat of a school that we're going to have next year that was really keeping kids in channels and lines, and to see what they're doing on sort of corporate levels has been hugely important. So activating those networks and resources beyond the school culture has been really helpful. So I'll pause. I'll stop for now and kick it back to Travis.
So we just wanted to end on some sort of final relevant notes. As I said at the beginning, before COVID-19, 3.3% of US high school students were homeschooled, and overnight, 100% of those school-age students, pre-K through 12, have been schooled at home. We know that our most important motivator and goal in North Star is what we must do, which is we must educate our children K through 12. We cannot have them hanging out there left to their own devices to teach and learn, because what we do is really important. And however we go about supporting our schools, our principals, and our teachers is the most critical thing for any community to do. We need to figure out what works in our communities and commit ourselves to that. As both Chris and Chris have said, is that this requires resources, and it requires the support of boards very much, and the support of communities. And finally, I think that, and maybe this is sort of leading with hope. I like Chris Valdez's term there. Is what we can do as we are moving through this is to learn from this experience about what we can do differently beyond the confines of a global education. So besides a global pandemic. So last but not least, we have put forth for some of us our learning plans. Marine Academies is there. We have 4 levels that we can move back and forth with seamlessly. Branson has its, and I know Marine Catholic is working on its piece. So we'll stop there, and Mary Jane, you're on for questions.
Great. Okay, here's a few questions. Are you planning on having teachers rotate between different cohorts?
Well, I'll speak for MA. Yes, because that's the only way we can really actually open school. And we understand that that's probably going to be permitted. But our deal is we know we need to social distance, track, and trace.
Great. Okay, how about you, Chris and Chris?
You know what Travis said, teachers will be moving between cohorts. And we've been working together actually to figure out ways that, we have the benefit of being so much smaller than all of you, so less students to worry about. And so we've really been focusing on how do we track, how do we contact trace very accurately for any positive test.
Great. And what about you, Chris?
And the same thing. We're lucky at Marine Catholic to have a huge footprint, so we have actually a lot of physical space, fields, and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, the goal is to have a whole mix and match experience.
Can you talk a little bit about what social emotional supports that you have built in for both your staff, but more importantly, your students?
I would, I'll say that just quickly. We started right away with what we were called sheltered in sessions, right? So beyond the classroom, these were things that took place in the evening. And given that we're a Catholic school, there were really shared prayer groups. So our campus ministry team supported our students with evening prayer groups, which at first there were tons of kids and it dropped off and then it picked up again. And so, but it was all invitational, and we broke it down by division. So kids were coming with their friends and that kind of thing. We invited parents to those as well. We also did the same exact kind of thing with counseling sessions. So we provided support group sessions. Those were not as popular as the individual sessions that our counselors continued to support kids with. So we did try those. We're going to be doing things differently in the fall, because our intention is to have kids on campus. But that was our last quarter's approach.
Great. Travis or Chris?
Chris?
No, you go ahead.
Well, I would say, one of the things we did for parents was to give them, a sense of what was happening, and the fact that, we had confidence in what we were doing. So like Branson, we did town halls on Zooms for all parents, different grade levels, and incoming parents. I think for our students, besides having counselors available, we also, our students took some real leadership themselves, and we supported them about creating a cooking club or a baking club or whatever that was. Or reading club. And so that was important for students to feel like they had agency, particularly high school students. And I think when kids feel like they have the room and the time and the support to do that, they do it. We also have advisory, and we continued with our assemblies twice a week.
And we did basically the same. We try to, the groups where the students are comfortable, they're affinity groups. For example, we have a lot of affinity groups. Those continue to meet. Sports teams, as anything we could that would be personal connections in a safe and trusted place for the students. So, and some of our teachers were able to weave it in better than others, but I think all were trying.
If I could just add one more thing, one of the things that we did find, and I wonder if this is true across the board here, is that we saw, this is anecdotally speaking from our counselors, is that there was a significant decrease in anxiety among teachers. I mean, excuse me, among students, that there was an expression of that, that because one of the things that happened is their lives did slow down, in fact, right? And so, you know, when you have a basically stable sort of functioning home, people were finding that they were really, there was a huge decrease in the stress levels. Again, anecdotally speaking, and someday we'll survey that to kind of get more information, but that's what we found, which was a huge benefit in some ways, a huge benefit for a lot of people here.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead. Believe it or not, a half hour is already up. We're a little over. So first of all, thank you to Travis. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Chris, for your partnership, your willingness to share. Look forward to all of our future collaborations, which I know there'll be many in the immediate as we figure out what school's going to look like as we welcome students back, but also into the future. So to everybody, this has been recorded. You'll be able to access it, share it with your friends, and as they've indicated, they're more than willing to help support in any and all ways. So thank you very, very much. Everybody, talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Let us
everybody.
know what you learn.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye.